Hello. Welcome to another YouTube Live. Here we are. We've had a little bit of a break. I've been away for a few weeks and now we're back with the Monday classes. Here you have your free session where you can ask all the questions, receive some free coaching, and anything related to do with anxiety, emotions, mind, that negative self-talk, anything related to embodiment as well. So, and also numerology. There's many things I do. So yes, here we are. And today I wanted to talk about stepping into courage and what can help us to do that. And yeah, so just a quick check-in, like how are you doing? How's your heart? How have the last few weeks been for you? I've been with family. So I went to the UK and I was helping out my sister. She just had a beautiful baby boy, so my second nephew. And yes, I was helping out. This is one of the things that's so important, like helping out new mothers or mothers that have another baby and helping them out, and whether that's like cooking or bringing some food or cooking or like cleaning or like doing something like that can be so helpful and so beneficial. So that's what I was doing, and meeting my new nephew, who's such a beautiful little thing. And yeah, and I wasn't able to do the lives whilst I was there because for many reasons. You don't really want a live when there's a crying baby in the background. And also the priority was being there with family. So that's why there was a little bit of a break. And yeah, now back here near Barcelona and with the YouTube lives. So if you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat. If anyone is going through anything in particular and you want some NLP insights into that, then just ask away. And today I wanted to talk about courage because, as you can probably notice, I'm growing out my henna, and it's been a real time of stepping into my courage. Like these last 3 months, it's been something that it's been a very interesting journey. It's not something that everyone will experience because not everyone goes grey so early. And yes, I am young, and I have a lot of grey hair, something that runs in the family. And whilst you can improve things with supplements and all of that, sometimes you just need to embrace the grey, and that's exactly what I'm doing. And I'm actually really loving it. I'm really enjoying it, and it's been a really surprising journey. So this is what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about fear. So even if you're not growing out grey hair or nothing related to that, I wanted to talk about fear in general, like when fear comes up, and there can be many different forms of how this comes up. Like for some people, it's like this underlying anxiety. For some people, it's like full-blown panic attacks. For other people, it's like specific things, like there may be specific triggers or specific things that's related to, and how we can move through that and step into courage. Because this is the thing, like sometimes, especially in the spiritual space, there can be this tendency to view fear as something bad, something low vibration, something that is not very good to be in, not to feel. There can be a lot of shaming and judging and blaming. And to be honest, this is, in my opinion, this is one of the most unspiritual things that we can do, which is a bit ironic. Though by avoiding aspects of the shadow, by avoiding certain emotions, by avoiding the completeness of this human experience, we're missing the immensity and the variety of what makes up this human experience, which is a very sacred experience. And emotions are part of that, and fear is part of that. Human beings, we wouldn't be alive today if we didn't have fear. Like if we felt no fear at all, the human race wouldn't have survived, because it's thanks to fear that we've been able to run away from tigers, or like animals that were going to eat us, or like other tribes that were going to like try and take over, or like whatever was happening in the past through the evolution of humanity. And some fear can be useful to keep us safe. And there's a very big difference between when fear is in flow, so when there's that intuitive knowing, like that feeling of, oh, something doesn't quite feel right, something feels a little bit off, and you can feel this, like almost like this. I mean, when it's in flow, it's not so much a freeze, but it's like you feel that little moment of apprehension, and that can be useful to pay attention to. And there's a very big difference between that and then remaining stuck in it, like wanting to, like just like completely freezing and paralyzing and not knowing what to do, or by avoiding, like running away, like flight, or having this response where you lash out in anger, or having a response where you're fawning, you're people pleasing. Or there's also the other response, which is flop, that you might have seen on social media, all these different responses: flight, fight, flop, freeze, all of that. I won't go into that in detail, though those are different responses on what can happen when a certain trigger comes up, when certain emotions come up, and especially related with fear. Now, fear, this is, I mean, my job being a NLP trainer, even though I don't do training specifically anymore, but I work one-on-one with clients, working with, like, being an NLP trainer, like one of the things that I focus on is helping people to see things differently, helping people to see a different perspective. Like this is like what most of my work is involved with, regardless of the topic, whether this is to do with relationships, whether this is to do with money, whether this is to do with health, whether this is to do with career options. Like there are so many different things. So one of the main focuses is like, how can we see things differently? Like, what are we missing? What haven't we seen yet? So with fear and emotions, like I love to ask the question of like, what do you believe about fear? Like really getting curious about what are the current beliefs around fear, and how can we start shifting that and seeing that, like seeing fear itself in a different light, seeing it differently. It's like, okay, what if it isn't this bad emotion that so many people think that it is in spiritual communities? What if it is a useful messenger? What if it is something that can really give us useful information, like really useful information about like what might be happening, or what the inner child within is needing, and if there are any unmet needs there. So it's essentially as a messenger. Every single emotion is a messenger, and including fear. Including fear. So the reason why I bring this up is because, as I said, mentioned about my hair, and I knew, like, I live a life where I try to listen as much as possible to my intuitive knowing, and just like really knowing, like, okay, like feeling in to my body, feeling into intuition, and just noticing like what feels expansive and what feels contractive, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, and being aware of that. And it's hard to describe sometimes, but I'm pretty sure that almost all of you, if not all of you, at some point have walked into a room and have sensed something. It's like, oh, has someone just had an argument here? Or there's a bit of tension here, or like what's happened? Or you've had some kind of feeling that something was going to happen, or someone was going to call you and they did, or you just knew that something wasn't quite right or wasn't for you, but you went ahead anyway, and then you found out that, yeah, it wasn't for you. Like the intuition is always communicating to us, and the intuition essentially is the communication from our soul. Our soul is communicating in some way, and it's guiding us, and it can guide us through different sensations through the body, and also that sense of expansiveness, or sometimes contracting if something's not meant to be for us. So it's just getting curious, like how your intuition communicates with you, and there can be many different ways that we experience that. And the way to really identify that first is just to notice in the past, like if there were instances where you had a feeling about something before and then later you found out like it went the way that you thought it might go, like pay attention, like what was that feeling, like how did you feel, like what was happening? Did you just know? Like some people are very, there are many different ways, like some people just know something, some people feel a lot more, some people even like have some guidance, like they hear thoughts, or like there are many different ways that we go through this. So it's just interesting to notice, okay, like how is that being communicated to me, like that intuition, that intuitive knowing, paying attention to that. And for me, it's the one that's the strongest for me is like the feeling, but also like just the knowing. It's like it's almost like a something drops into my mind, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's what it is, and it just feels absolutely right. And this year, that's what it was for me. It was like, okay, this is the year I'm gonna stop coloring my hair, and I've colored my hair for many years with henna and natural colors. I don't use chemicals, though it's something that I knew at some point I would stop because it is a bit of a bother to do it. I was going to swear. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear on YouTube Live. It can be a little bit of a bother to do it all the time, and it costs money, time, energy. And I got to the point where I was like why are we trying to cover things up? Why are we trying to cover things up? And I say we, like obviously not everyone is. But especially in the beauty industry, like with women, there is such a huge emphasis on things needing to look perfect or according to how things are in the magazines, or how the models are, or like having like no wrinkles, or like even getting rid of hair. Like naturally women have hair, but in society it's like we're so conditioned and so programmed according to what beauty and like beauty in women is meant to be. And I got really curious about this, and I was like, wow, like yeah, it's really interesting how as men grow older there's not much of a questioning in terms of them growing out their grey, and they become these silver foxes, as the saying goes. Though with women, sometimes there's this perspective of like, oh, she's letting herself go. Oh, she's going to look so much older. Oh, she's yeah, like she's going through a crisis. She's like all these different things. Some things that some people have said to me, and it's just really interesting to notice that, and just to get curious, like okay, like like what do we believe is beautiful in women, and how much of that is really coming from us truly, or how much of that is what we've been conditioned to believe is beautiful. So yeah, so there was a lot of fear that came up for me, because this is something that I've obviously used color in my hair for so many years and hidden my gray hair, and like really going through that, and then embracing it has been quite a journey, and it's brought up a lot of fears in the beginning. And there were fears of like, what will people think? People won't, like people think it's ugly, or that it ages me, or that I won't find a partner because I'll have grey hair, or like all these different thoughts that the mind, this is the thing that fear especially, it wants to protect. It wants to protect, keep us safe. And sometimes there are very real dangers, and that's when it's useful. And then other times, a lot of it is created by the mind. And the mind is going off on some story of how we think other people will think, or how we think society will perceive us, like people in our circles. And often a lot of that is created, and we have no idea really, and we're just assuming and judging ourselves, assuming that we think we know what they're going to think. Though it's been really interesting going through this as I'm about 3 months into it now. So as I've naturally just let it grow out, people's different responses, and the vast majority of people have been so overwhelmingly positive and reassuring, and just really people, so many of my friends were like, I love it. I love it. And even people that don't really know me that well, they've been very positive, and it's opened up a lot of conversations with other women who want to do the same, yet they haven't quite tapped into that courage to do that yet. And whether you're a woman or not, and whether you're growing out your grey or not, use this talk, use this, what I'm talking about today, in terms of fear and stepping into courage. You can apply this to any area and anything that you might be feeling a little bit fearful about. For example, like asking someone out, or applying for a job that you think, like a really wonderful job that you really want, and you're not quite sure you're going to get it, and it brings fear. Or making a massive life change, like moving countries, or ending a relationship, or there's many different things that can bring up fear. So the first thing is just to notice, what is fear teaching us? If fear is a messenger, if it's bringing a message about something, what is that message? And there's a very big difference between feeling fear and remaining stuck in it, and feeling fear and moving through it. So I like to see emotions as doors, and it's like this door opens up and we can move through that. We can see what's beyond that, or we can just shut it and ignore it, try to ignore it. But essentially, at some point, that door's going to open. This is the thing with emotions. Most people, running away, and believe me, I learned the hard way because I had weekly panic attacks because of this. It's when you're trying to avoid something and just shoving it down, not really addressing particular emotions, then it just builds up like a pressure cooker. So it's important, if there's fear there, look at it, learn from it, listen to it. Even with those worst case scenarios, sometimes the mind and fear can go into these stories of what if, and it creates these whole stories that something might happen or something won't happen. And in those instances, what I found really useful is simply just thanking fear. And it seems a bit weird at first because it's why would I thank fear? But when you do, it's amazing what happens, because then that thought, or that fear related to those thoughts, it ceases to be such a big issue. So for example, thank you, fear, for reminding me how valuable that person is, or how much I care about that job, or how much I want to create this particular thing in my life. Thank you, fear, for reminding me. And then coming back to the present moment. Just doing that can be a complete life changer for some people. So this is the thing. It's with fear, it's not about and when we hear the phrase fearless, I was reading this the other day, that I have a pack of cards and I was with a friend, And there was a message in the card, and it was saying, like, fearless. Like when we say, oh, that person's fearless, often we think the meaning of that word fearless is to be fearless, like not to feel any fear. It's like, oh, they don't feel any fear and they've got lots of courage and they're doing whatever they're doing. But if you actually notice like what the, like, separate the words, so like fear less, it doesn't mean an absence of fear. It simply just means that you're focusing less on the fear. Fear less. So it's like you're opening up that door, you're walking through it and realizing that fear is actually an invitation to connect with courage. Whenever we feel fear, there's an invitation there to connect to a loving action and step into courage. So the question that can be really useful is, what loving action can I take to help you move into that new chapter or that new experience or whatever it is that you're wanting to change? It's like, how can that help? Like, what loving action can I take? What loving action can I take? So you might have heard of the book Feel the Fear, Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. It's a very famous book. This is a common misconception. It's not about never feeling fear or not feeling fear or just being completely free of fear. It's not about that. Like, courage is fear in loving action. Courage is fear in loving action. So those people who step into their courage, they're feeling it all. They're feeling it all, the fear, the anxiety, all of that. Obviously, depending on the situation and the person, but most of the time they're feeling that. They're feeling the fear. And they're taking loving action. They're doing it anyway. So a few things that can help, like, let's get practical, because I love to make things practical. This can be really helpful. A few things that can help whenever you're noticing some anxiety, some fear coming up. You're like, oh, I'm not quite sure, like I feel nervous, but I know this is the right thing to do, but it feels scary. Like, first of all, connect with the breath. That's like number one. Connect with the breath. The breath can be this incredible anchor, and this is especially useful for anxiety. It's like inhale, exhale, like slowing that breath down, deeper, slower breaths. Coming back to the breath. Because the more we can breathe and connect with the breath, the more we're bringing in more oxygen to ourselves, and then we can think more clearly. And then also we're able to like really connect with that life energy rather than holding on to anything. The common tendency, like when we're feeling fear, is to, like, everything stops and we stop breathing. And then notice the difference, like what happens when we have that inhale, we have that exhale, like we really flow through that breath and then connect with that breath. That helps us to step into courage. Also, notice the stories, like notice what you're believing about fear, what you're telling yourself about fear, and what you're telling yourself about a current situation or a current whatever challenge that you're going through. It's like, okay, what are the stories? And are you viewing fear as something negative? It's like, are you saying like, oh, I shouldn't be fearful. Oh, I should, like, look at those other people. They're being more courageous than me. Oh, I need to do it like them. Or like, what if this happens? What if that doesn't happen? What if? Like, there's a lot of what ifs. Or like being anything but focused on the present. So it's like focused on the past, or most often on the future. It's like focused on the future that you don't want, and is noticing, okay, what's the story? How can I reframe that? How can I rewrite that story? Because when we tell ourselves a different story, everything shifts. The experience shifts. Might not change the situation straight away, but our experience of it shifts. That's the key. That's the key. So notice the stories. Like, what are you believing? What are you believing? So in terms of my hair, I was I was believing, like, in the beginning, even though it was pretty okay for me. Like, I connected pretty early on to the courage because I knew it was the right thing to do for me. Though there were a few moments in the beginning where it's like, oh, what will people say? People won't like it. People will think that I will look too old. Like, those were the stories. Those were the stories. So, first step, breath, and then notice the stories. Then, what can be really helpful is bringing some form of support, but in a somatic way. So, really feeling your feet on the ground, and noticing that contact with the ground and seeing that as support, experiencing that as support, your feet on the ground. It's like, the earth, that contact, that support that we have. Always, always there. Whether we are like with our feet on the ground, whether we're lying down, whether we are sat down, there's very few of us are floating in the air. So there's always some form of gravity and some form of contact, whether that's with the ground directly or some item of furniture or sitting on something or being on something. Even if you're flying in an airplane, you're sat on a chair. So like, there's some form of support there. So noticing that support and seeing that as support and feeling that contact of the body against that support. And a huge amount of comfort can come from that, like noticing that support. So first, breath. Then notice the stories, like, what are you telling yourself about the situation that might be contributing to more fear? And then notice, like, what support is there. And that support can help propel you forward into taking that loving action that you want to take. So once you've connected to all of that, like the breath, the stories, and also the support, you can ask yourself that question I mentioned before. What loving action can I take? What loving action can I take that helps me to connect with whatever life experience I want to experience? To really have a wonderful, happy, long, fulfilled life full of abundance and connection and joy and love. Yes, through the action. And just like a quick mention on like when people feel overwhelmed, because there's anxiety, there's fear, or like fear's like the general like theme, but then there's anxiety, there's panic attacks, there's like many different variations of this. And sometimes there can be this feeling of overwhelm as well, like when people going through challenging situations or needing to make a decision, like the fear can come up in this sense of overwhelm, like not knowing what to do. And there can be many different responses to that. So some people like bury their head in the sand, some people run away, like those different responses that I mentioned earlier. So when there's this sense of overwhelm, it's really important to notice, okay, where am I placing my focus? Because often the focus is placed on many things at once. There comes the overwhelm. It's like, oh, like lots of things. And that can be external overwhelm or internal overwhelm. So externally might be focused on many different things, creating too much, like saying yes to too many things or not having enough space or time in your schedule, or like just like like not having like boundaries as well, like just receiving lots of feedback and opinions from other people. Or there are many different ways of having that external overwhelm, even with the senses, like being in busy crowded places, I used to, when I was experiencing panic attacks, like that was one of the worst things, like being in a crowded place, like going to the market, like often I couldn't manage that in the early days because it was just too overwhelming. Too many sounds, too many sights, too many noises. It was just too much. So there can be this external overwhelm and there can be this internal overwhelm, which is when we haven't created space within our mind and our emotions. Like we're holding on to too many thoughts and too many feelings, and we're not expressing that. We're not communicating that. And that could be with a professional, that could be with a friend, that could be writing things down on a piece of paper, or punching a pillow, or doing something to express that. So those are the different ways that we can have overwhelm. And when there's a sense of overwhelm, it's really important to notice, okay, where am I placing my focus? How can I simplify? How can I simplify? What can I let go of? What's not really that important? What can I let go of? How can I simplify? How can I create more space? Like what's the most important thing to focus on, and just have your focus on that one thing or one or two things, and that's it. So that can also help. Though really in terms of stepping into courage, it's those things that I mentioned. It's like, okay, yeah, notice what you're telling yourself about the situation. Notice how you're connecting with the breath. Notice that support that's always there, the chair or the floor or the wall, some support. Feeling that and really feeling that within the body. And then taking loving action towards what you want to create in your life. So there's so much more, but I'll leave it there for this short class all about fear and stepping into courage. And I'd love to hear your shares as well, if there are certain things that have helped you. There are many, many things that I haven't mentioned that can also help, like, for example, accountability, having a support group, having support from a professional. There are many different things that can help stepping into courage. And really also like focusing on the why, like what it is. So for example, if you're moving countries or you want to end a relationship or start a relationship, like what's the why? What's the purpose? What's the deeper thing that you're connecting to? Use that as motivation, use that as fuel. That can help to propel you forward and make those changes. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. You can feel free to pop them in the chat, and anything else any other questions you have about fear, anxiety, emotions, NLP, all of that, just pop them in the comments section, and I read all the comments. And some of these talks are actually based on requests from listeners and people who view these videos. So if you have some like specific things that you want me to discuss, then absolutely I can talk about that and bring that to future classes. So yeah. And if you want to dive into this further, like if you're struggling with anxiety, if you're struggling with making some life changes, if you want some clarity in your life, if you want to step into that courage, I have this 3-session pack that is a wonderful foundation to really give you the tools. Like I'm not, first of all, I'm not a therapist. I'm an NLP trainer. So this is not, therapy is very different. This is not a place where you just go and talk and that's it. Like working through the emotional stuff and having this ongoing therapeutic relationship and package with your therapist, where you go every week and it's ongoing for many, many weeks and months and years sometimes. That's not what we're doing. This is 3 sessions, and in 3 sessions I give you the tools. So I really believe in empowering clients and helping clients to really connect to their inner power, like to really recognize that they can make changes and to do so in a very proactive, practical way. and help them to step into that. And you get to learn some useful NLP tools and techniques that you get to keep for life as well. Because I mean, it's probably not the best marketing on my end, though I really believe in empowering clients and not having clients dependent on me. So that's my priority, to teach you everything I can within 3 sessions that can help you to reduce anxiety and step into your confidence. So, yes, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. And yeah, may this year, as we continue to step forward, may this year be a wonderful year of stepping into our power. I certainly feel it. I turned 40 a few days ago, and yeah, it's like every day, every step, it feels like a new beginning, new chapter. And this is something I was talking about with a client a while back as well, like how we can perceive every new day, every new moment, this opportunity for creating a change, this opportunity for stepping into a new chapter of our lives. So what are you going to create? What are you going to create for this new chapter? I'd love to hear. Okay, sending you all my love, and I will be back next Monday at 7 Central European Time, Barcelona time, for another class, and I will see you then.